Well, we're going to go in multiple.
Speaking of
directions
Dadaism
from this. Yeah, exactly. It's you next, right? Josh.
We're going back in time to Elton John. Goodbye.
That was another Huey Lewis reference. Did you catch that, Josh?
Yes, I did that on purpose.
I caught it. That was not a really good Huey Lewis song. Let's be honest. I mean, that was maybe mediocre Huey Lewis at best.
Very good Huey Lewis song. That would be oxymoronic for me. But
damn.
We'll get a chance to talk about that though in the 80s apparently, since Josh has forced that issue.
All right. Well, we're talking about Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and in the opening montage you heard Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and now you're going to hear Gray Seal. Matt, what are the numbers?
Yeah, so Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road comes in at number 54 in the 1970s on Best Ever Albums, number 6 in 1973, number 221 of all time, and it did make Rolling Stone's list, almost cracking the top 100, 112 on Rolling Stone. It's Elton John's highest rated album, both in Rolling Stone and Best Ever Albums.
Okay. This was released October 5th, 1973. It is his 7th studio album. And the only other album we've discussed is Honky Chateau from 1972, a year before this, but 2 albums before this, in fact.
And as we've mentioned, that is the subtitle of the podcast.
Yes.
Filming the Stacks, Honky Chateau. So, yes.
I'm going to give a little bit of bio, since this is actually the only Elton John album we talk about in depth.
Which, I'm sorry, I think that's kind of crazy.
I know, I think it's crazy too.
Considering
what a kind of as we'll see, he's kind of a mammoth figure in pop music and music in the 70s. He was born Sir Elton was born.
He was always knighted out of the womb. They're sitting there with a sword when he gets popped out. It's like, all right, before you cut the cord.
Sir Elton
Wait till you hear my music, lad.
Sir Elton was born Reginald Kenneth Dwight in 1947 in southeast London, England. He got into rock and roll music early in his childhood because his parents brought home a lot of records like Elvis and Bill Haley, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis. And he said that when he heard Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis, that was it. That was all it took for him to become interested in rock and roll music. And so you can see the influence that has on, at least on his his stage act. He started playing piano at age 7, and at 15 he was hired as a pianist at a local pub and played popular standards there. In 1962 he formed a band called Bluesology and played with them until 1967. He was a backing band for many R&B acts that came to England. He even backed the Isley Brothers when they were on tour. In 1967, he met Bertie Taupin when they both answered the same ad in NME that was placed by Ray Williams. And Williams gave Elton John the lyrics that were written by Bertie Taupin, then he wrote music to them and then sent it back to Taupin. And when they first met in person later in 67, they made their first song, Scarecrow, together. And this has pretty much been their writing style and their collaboration style, which is kind of unusual in my mind. Taupin always writes the lyrics and then sends them to Elton John, and he puts the music to them. And it's never them at the same time, like writing songs together. Elton's not thinking of lyrics. He always thinks of himself as just writing the music, and he has said that he has no interest in writing lyrics.
Sounds like my kind of guy.
Yeah. So it's kind of
he is the Matt of popular music.
It kind of blows my mind because
yeah,
I can't imagine thinking about music that way, even and I'm not even remotely a musician or play an instrument or anything, but it's so hard in my mind to separate the music from the lyrics. But I guess that's how they do it.
I think of it, only in the context of like classical music and stuff, but you pick a different genre, right? Like if you so I mean he's that way.
Yeah, he's clearly interested in doing the piano parts and like putting the melodies together and the construction and the arrangements and all that stuff, and he probably did poorly on the verbal section of the SATs like I did.
I always find it weird to sing something like Candle in the Wind like he does without having written Candle.
Right.
It's weird to me. Yeah. And be able to write the part of the song that's the emotional coda, like that's the part that's always amazing to me. Like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So shortly after they met, he began going by the name Elton John in homage to two members of Bluesology, his saxophonist Elton Dean and vocalist Long John Baldry. And then he legally changed his name to Elton Hercules John.
Long John Baldry.
Yeah.
That's an all-timer right there.
Oh, Long Johnson.
But continue. I hear another name that sounds like
Yes.
it's going to be on the Mount Rushmore too.
He legally changed his name to Elton Hercules John on January 7th, 1972.
Can you imagine how that works? I already have the Elton and the John. What'll make it pop in the middle? Hercules.
I know.
So,
I guess when you change your name, you can pick whatever you want.
Sure. Why not?
Yep. From 67 to 69, Elton and Bernie Taupin were staff songwriters for DJM Records, and that's kind of where they got their chops, more so. And then they transitioned into making songs for Elton John to sing, to record for the same label. His first album was called Empty Sky, and it was released in 1969. And then the self-titled follow-up, Elton John, was released in 1970. That had his first hit single, Your Song, which reached number 8 in the US. And then that was followed up by the album Tumbleweed Connection, which is a kind of a concept album, and then followed by a soundtrack to a 71 movie called Friends, which is a British movie, and then followed by a live album called 11/17/70, Madman Across the Water, and then Honky Chateau, which became his first number 1 album, and then followed up by Don't Shoot Me, I'm the Piano Player, and then Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. So this is a massive amount of albums in a short amount of time. He was very prolific, and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road is kind of the culmination of this period, and his most prolific and subsequently his most popular album in terms of sales. They originally planned to record this album in Jamaica, but had so many problems while they were there that they left and went back to the chateau in France where they recorded the previous 2 albums, Honky Chateau and Don't Shoot Me, I'm the Piano Player.
We should have gone to Nigeria.
Yeah, it sounds kind of like the same experience based on what I've read. He had wanted to go to Jamaica in part because the Stones had just recorded Goat's Head Soup there, but due to all these different factors, kind of the general political economic situation there, the fact that there was a Fraser Foreman fight there at the same time, and then the studio itself was very subpar. Like, they didn't have equipment and they couldn't get equipment that we needed, and the piano was substandard. So all of these kind of things, they were there for a little bit. Bernie Taupin wrote the lyrics in 2.5 weeks to this whole album, and John wrote most of the music in about 3 days. He is quoted as saying he wrote about 25 songs while he was in Jamaica, which is just crazy.
How much cocaine was he doing?
I'm sure boatloads.
Well, he said this is before things went off the rails, so I guess it was a manageable amount.
It was a regular amount of cocaine.
They recorded this entire album in 2 weeks while they were in France. It was not originally planned as a double album, but they were so productive and had so many songs to choose from that they said, let's do a double album. It debuted at number 17 on the Billboard charts and went to number 1 on its 4th week and stayed for 8 weeks. It was the best-selling album of 1974, and it had 4 singles off of it. As I said, he released 8 albums in about 5 years, from 69 to 73, which is, as prolific as anything we've talked about with CCR or some of the other bands that have released a lot of albums in a short amount of time. This was his second album, released in 1973 alone, and this is a double album, so that's essentially 3 albums in 1 year. He also had a contract with MCA where he would do 2 albums per year, so this was kind of within the contract too. I don't know why. I couldn't find out why he agreed to that. I guess just because he can make a lot of money. But some other facts about this. Well, I'll wait to these other facts to kind of sum up his career as a whole. I'm not going to do a lot of post bio. Let's talk about the album. Matt, what did you think about Goodbye Yellow Brick Road?
So we're at an album here that I've known and I've had for many years. I wasn't terribly into Elton John as a kid. I was more of a Billy Joel kid. But I did see them play. I saw them play together in Miami, like in '94 or something like that. And he played. I think Elton John opened with "Funeral for a Friend," "Love Lies Bleeding." And I was like, "What the heck? That is awesome! I've never heard of that before." So then I went out and got this record, and I remember liking it. I mean, this kind of starts off with that. That's a great song. It's a fantastic opener. Yeah. It's like this epic. It's like three songs in one kind of a deal. And then it goes into like three. I don't know if you can you call Elton John songs bangers, because
yes,
banging on the piano.
You got three bangers on there with "Candle in the Wind," "Benny and the Jets," and "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road." So
although "Candle in the Wind" is not really a banger in the traditional sense,
it's a banger in the sense that it sold a bajillion copies and everybody knows it. So And then it just goes into a bunch of other songs before it gets to "Saturday's All Right for Fighting," which is another really well-known song. So I did have this record. I always remembered it, kind of going into this week, and I hadn't listened to it in forever. But going into this week, I remember kind of liking it, but not, loving it, thinking maybe that it was too long and things of that nature. But I think I'm wrong about that. I think if you're going to do a double album, this is certainly a way to do it, because this album's awesome. It's a really fun listen. There's like hardly any down or low moments. I think there's only really one that I go, okay, I don't really like that. And it's like a small part. It's this when the chorus in "The Song Has No Title" is kind of leaves me a little flat. I like the verses a lot, but the chorus not so much. But this is a great mix of songs here. We were talking about variety. I mean, it's the variety for Elton John in terms of really fast-paced, upbeat songs, piano-driven, rock and roll, danceable songs, really, feel-good songs, and then more ballads, more like, slower ballads, kind of sometimes somber-sounding songs, but just all really good. And then you've got like whatever Jamaica Jerk-Off could be categorized as, that kind of like calypso kind of novelty song, exactly. But even that, I like that. It's like this upbeat kind of like, you're bouncing around and stuff. But it's just beautiful stuff. It's just great music. He's a fantastic musician. He's a fantastic songwriter. And it is a long record. It's an hour and 20 minutes long, something like that.
Yeah.
But it's just got some great moments. High points for me. Obviously, I think the singles are all good. I will say though, I always thought that "Benny and the Jets," I still like that song, but I always thought that was one of I liked a lot of. That's one of my least favorite singles for Elton John. I still like it, but I don't know, like the end gets to me a little bit. It's like the synthesizer that he's using is. Yeah. It's like it's okay. I don't know. And it's the over over and over again. I was like, okay, like you could chop 30 seconds off of that and I'd be good. But it's small problem.
I think he also was surprised at how popular it was.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's interesting, the very staccato nature of it, which it's probably a less traditional type of single, perhaps. But Roy Rogers is a beautiful song. I've always really liked that. That's a very pretty song. "Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting." Didn't you say that that's your favorite Elton John song, Josh? Did you say that once?
It seems to fluctuate. I think that is one of my favorites.
Yeah, well, Sherry said that was her favorite. She's like, this is just by hands down her favorite. So I was like, oh, well, Josh might agree with you. So, this is probably peak Elton John. I still think there's songs that my favorite song might still be what is it, "Tiny Dancer." That's on a different album, but Honky Chateau is a great album. I love that too. I might like that maybe a little bit. I don't know. It's hard for me to tell. But for a really long album, this keeps my attention, and it's got enough variety here. And there's really, I don't know. I can't really think of many bad moments on this at all. So big thumbs up for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think people know my thoughts on Elton John. I love Elton John. I never was a Billy Joel guy, Matt. I realized pretty quickly what he was and what Elton John were and what the difference is. And I think this album's a good example of why. This is, in my opinion, this is the best example of the merger of what Bernie Taupin does and what Elton John does. There's really Bernie Taupin can sometimes, his lyrics can be a little bit obtuse at times, right? Like he's like the girl with the curl. Like his songs are either really good or sometimes kind of like, what the hell's he writing about? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But when he hits. And one thing he does is, I mean, when I get asked the question, what's the saddest song that you've listened to? There's a lot of stuff, but like I've often quoted Empty Garden by Elton John as I think the saddest song, and that's a Bernie Taupin set of lyrics. And I think one of the things, it's interesting because one of the things this album has is I think some of my favorite deeper cuts from Elton John are all over this album.
Agreed.
Gray Seal, I was glad you picked that, Josh, because that's a fantastic song. I've always loved I've Seen That Movie Too is a song that's great. All the Girls Love Alice is a deep, deep cut is one. Matt did mention Roy Rogers, which I like a lot too. And so there's a lot of tracks on this album that I really like that are the deeper cuts. I'm with you, Matt. I don't love Benny and the Jets as a solo. It's probably one of my least favorite songs on this album.
Yeah.
Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. When people say to me, list like 20 to 30 perfect pop songs, I always say Goodbye Yellow Brick Road is up there because I think there's almost nothing, like as a construct, that song's pretty much flawless. I always am amazed whenever I hear Candle in the Wind, what a great song that is. And it's so commercial because of the Princess Di stuff. I almost think it got like, it was not done well, because when you listen to it in the context, it's about Marilyn Monroe, obviously, is the whole song's about Marilyn Monroe. And when you listen to it in that context, it's a very touching eulogy. And the lyrics are, I just love the whole concept of Marilyn Monroe as a candle in the wind, and just, it's perfect, if you know anything about her life. And the way that Elton John constructed, like, the music sounds like the type of song you would want written about you at your funeral, except that when you hear it, you would have lived a melancholy life to some degree. And so it's like both perfect and sad. So as Matt mentioned, Funeral for a Friend, Love Lies Bleeding, there's a reason Elton John plays that song often to start his shows, because it's a fantastic way to just have an album explode on you in different stuff. If you're going to do a double album, and I always will say that a double album probably should have been 10 to 12 tracks instead of a double album, and I won't say I disagree with that here, but this one's as close to being a double album that doesn't wear me out as any double album that we've done so far. Yeah. It doesn't wear me out, and there's enough variety and enough good songs spread throughout that at no point did I find it a chore to listen to. So I mean, I've always loved this album. I always will love this album. It's one of the best pop albums of the 1970s. Elton John, I will long say it, I think it's amazing to me that he's not universally recognized as easily one of the top 10 biggest pop acts in music history. And it's to me, it's undeniable. And you don't hear people say that. You hear people strain to make cases for people that I think have much less of a gigantic career, right, than Elton John has. And I'll still say he's one of the 10, in my opinion, 5 most consequential pop artists in rock and roll music. So there's my take.
Yeah, I really like this album too. I was surprised about, like what you guys said, all of the other songs beyond the singles that everyone knows on this album. That is what really kind of drove it home for me in terms of making it a great album. Songs that I had never heard of, or heard before, like Gray Seal and Ballad of Danny Bailey. You guys didn't mention that one, but I love that song. All the Girls Love Alice. That's like an 80s Hall & Oates song almost at times. And even like Matt said, Roy Rogers, which is kind of like a country piano song, and the way he sings the chorus is just so, he holds on the R or twists it a certain way when he says goodbye, or I can't remember what the chorus goes now, but he says Roy Rogers in an interesting way.
Turn on the TV, shut out the lights.
Yep.
Roy Rogers. Yep.
And he's a really good piano player, and this whole album is anchored by the piano. That's kind of an obvious thing to say, but over and over again, he is playing the piano in such an interesting way, and in a distinct way, and an Elton John way. I don't think, the Jerry Lee Lewis and the Little Richard certainly come to mind, but who else has strong piano playing like Elton John does, and those other artists? He's in that conversation, I think, in terms of pop piano, rock piano playing. And the other thing I noticed is just kind of how nostalgia and pre-Fame life hang over this album. That's kind of, I think that would be kind of the concept of it, and over and over again in the lyrics and this the sound of it. That's what I got over and over.
That's a great point. Yep.
Candle in the Wind, Bernie Taupin said that it's about Marilyn Monroe, but it's more about any artist that kind of dies too soon, and people kind of fixate on their life and how they went out. And yeah, it's really enjoyable. I don't know his catalog. He's so prolific. He goes on to make dozens of albums after this, and this is such a good representation of what he was at his peak, and those earlier albums are certainly well worth discovering as well. So yeah, I really like this. Is probably one of the strongest double albums that we've done by far, for sure.
That's a great point, Josh, about the lyrics too, because I think even Goodbye Yellow Brick Road is sort of saying, like, the yellow brick road, right, leads to a certain place theoretically, and conceptually that is almost him saying Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And it, to me, lyrically, it's in life, right? That life, you've got like a Danny Bailey, he puts in, this person was 25 when they died. Candle in the Wind is a thing. Roy Rogers has elements of that. Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting is sort of almost West Side Story-y in terms of the feel of the lyrics. I've seen that movie too, is almost not celebrating nostalgia, right? Like more like get on with your life. So you're 100% right, Josh. So great observation there.
Even Sweet Painted Lady is kind of like a nostalgic song for prostitutes or something. Yep. It's in a strange way.
But it's kind of like a lot of, like, if you even go with the Yellow Brick Road idea, right? Like Dorothy, like if you watch Wizard of Oz, right? And these different people that she's on the road with and the Wicked Witch, it seems like a lot of the lyrics are people that the world becomes too big for, or just, they can't survive in the context of the world, or are victimized or struggle with it. So, but yeah, Candle in the Wind is as much about fame as it is about Marilyn Monroe. So, yeah.
His backing band is called the Elton John Band on this album, and it consists of Davy Johnston on guitar, Dee Murray on bass, and Nigel Olsson on drums. They also all three of them do the backing vocals on these tracks, which, if you pay attention, are also really good. They're
always
really
has
singers.
Good bands.
Yeah, these guys are consistent, and they are always the Elton John Band, and they've been with him throughout his whole career, on and off. Nigel Olsson and Dee Murray were from Spencer Davis Group as well. It's not really a band we mentioned, but they're kind of they're a well-known band. Ray Cooper is also on tambourine, and he's considered part of the Elton John Band later on. He takes over for drums.
Yeah, that guitar part on Love Lies Bleeding is great. It's not, usually Elton John songs you're getting like piano up front, but the guitar gets to shine, there, and a couple other places in the record too. So I've always liked that. And then I forgot to mention too, another song I really like on this, another deep cut. I always love Dirty Little Girl. It's got this funky, like kind of like, like, I don't know, a little edge to it. He's like this like snarl that he's singing in the chorus or whatever. It's just kind of it's great. It's a great song. This great album, and it's kind of like I don't know. I was just really interested in like why wasn't left with more of an impression. Like this week I was like, oh, I like it, it's fine. But now I'm like listening to it this week. I'm like, this is great. It's like what was there was nothing wrong with this at all.
Well, two things real quick. Number one, I'm starting to realize too, lyrically, Josh, that a lot of it is about, like, for lack of a better way of putting it, like bad boys and bad girls, right? In terms of the protagonists on this album. So that I'm like, more. As Matt mentioned, Dirty Little Girl, I'm like, there's another song about someone who's struggling. It's like, that there's a couple different songs about. I don't want to say oversexed, because that's not what but you get what I'm saying? Sort of like figures that. The female figure, and then the male figures seem to be like these outlaw gangy type figures, like, and stuff, whether it be Benny and the Jets or, the Ballad of Danny Bailey or Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, there's a male archetype too. So, and then number 2, Matt, here's a question for you. Do you think that part of what you're seeing there is the fact that we are now getting to these albums with such a rich context ahead of it that maybe we appreciate like how they're coming in because we have more of an idea of what the sonic landscape was before this hits? And so when you're listening to Goodbye Yellow Brick Road in isolation, you might not get it, but when you're listening to it after listening to music primarily from 1960 to 1973, you have a little bit more of an idea of what it would sound like in 1974.
Potentially, I think too. I think with these albums that we're covering in the proper episodes, I'm really giving these listens. I'm not just listening to these once or twice. I'm listening to these like 5, 6, 7 times. Like it's kind of all I listen to the whole week, to be honest. It's like, I listen to these a lot, unless I hate it. Like I didn't, so like I didn't listen to Chelsea Girl. Maybe I got to 3 or 4 and I was like, I can't do this anymore. But yeah, I think that might be part of it too. And I don't know. It was just, it's one of those things. It also could just be one of those albums that, sometimes you put away and you just forget about, and it's been years and years, and all of a sudden, for some reason, it comes back out again. And you're like, holy crap, I forgot, like, or this is better than what I remember, for whatever reason. So, I think that's part of it. He's great, man. Like I've definitely over the years have gotten to appreciate Elton John a lot more. We should be covering him more because I know he's got other stuff, and I knew this. I knew Honky Chateau, but I don't know Tumbleweed Connection too much, or Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy or whatever. There's albums that, I think. That's like his second highest rated album on Best Ever Album. So there's some stuff on here that there's plenty of his stuff that I don't know. So we just happen to cover the 2 albums that I know the best.
Yeah. Just a couple more, few things. David Henschel, he's the recording engineer on this album. He plays the synthesizer, and he also engineered All Things Must Pass, and he's worked with Genesis also. I saw. Elton John has sold more.
Double albums.
Yeah, I guess so. He's sold more than 300 million albums. He has more than 30 albums. Over 50 top 40 hits between the US and the UK, with 9 number 1 singles and 7 consecutive number 1 albums in the US. According to Billboard, he's the top solo artist of all time, and he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1994, his first year of eligibility. He also goes on to make tons of albums. As I said, hits on most of them, and he has 3/4 of an EGOT, which he's got Grammys, he's got Oscars, and he's got a Tony. So he just needs to write some music for TV, and he'll probably get all 4. He's one of the first and few white artists to appear on Soul Train, which I thought was interesting. Crossed over that way on the R&B track sound.
If you remember, Bowie was on there too. We talked about Golden Years. Yep.
He performed with Guns N' Roses multiple times.
Yeah.
He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by Axl Rose.
I didn't know that. I knew Axl was a big fan. I'd like to see that speech.
Yeah. Candle in the Wind was performed for Princess Di's funeral, as you mentioned, in 1997, and became the biggest and fastest selling single of all time. It was the first single to go diamond on Billboard, selling over 11 million copies. And in 1992, he started the Elton John AIDS Foundation, and he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth in 1998. So a lot there to discover. He's had a rich life. I mean, he's got a movie made after him, Rocket Man, recently, and which is enjoyable. And go ahead.
I will say, when you were talking about Axl Rose, I always think of like the controversial time when he performed with Eminem, and I remember watching that Grammy performance, and it's just I always think of, for some reason, that Thank You song by Dido, which is also the chorus of Stan. I always think of, for some reason, Elton John saying like, my teeth's gone cold, I'm wondering why, like him singing Dido in the Eminem song, and it just always makes me laugh when I think of that. Like it's like Elton John like thrust into like Eminem's world. It always makes me laugh. So yeah, sorry.
No, that's all I had to say. He's got a rich output that everyone can discover, and maybe he was underappreciated for a while, and I think we're trying to make him more appreciated.